Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another week of preparation with me, T.Mayne, back again for another weekly market forecast. Now, in today's one, guys, we're going to be getting into AUDCAD, AUDJPY, Aussie dollar, Swiss franc, yen, NZDCAD, New Zealand dollar, JPY. Now, those are the 6 pairs that we're going to be getting into. So we'll start off with AUDCAD. Now guys, for AUDCAD, let's just hop up to the daily just for a second. Now on the daily, guys, what we can see is a market that has found support in this area here, pushed to the upside, violated some structural highs over there. Now looking at our most recent price action, what we can see, or what we are paying attention to, is these two things. Number one, how do we get to our support area? And number two, what we do at this support area. How do we reject and the like from this support area? Now on AUDCAD, what we can see is structure beginning to decelerate towards our important support. What we've done as we drop down onto our 4 hour is we've then begun to isolate structure. So identifying that our resistance areas start from this point, and from this point on we then see AUDCAD entering this descending structure. So our structure beginning there, obviously taking into account our extreme highs, drawing in our resistance trend line over there, and then again taking into account our extreme lows, and then beginning to draw our support trend line from these structural areas here. So we do understand that from a higher time frame perspective, maybe we can say from a daily perspective, prices can come. They have given us that first touch, we have seen the second touch. Price can come and give us this third touch of our support trend line before we see any buying opportunities from these structural areas. So this is one potential setup that we're looking for over the course of next week. Is we're waiting to see price pull down into this area of value, give us that reversal structure, reason to enter this market, and obviously that's when we begin to enter long. So looking for this kind of a setup on AUDCAD. So we've established our directional bias of our higher time frames, understanding that price is approaching important higher time frame support. Price has been descending towards that support and decelerating at the same time in a corrective manner, and as well as we are seeing those nice bullish reactions from these support structures. So assuming that if price does come down for our third touch, we will begin to start looking for those buying opportunities once again. So that is our directional bias, guys. We also might look for a setup just a little bit early on this pair. So we've identified this important structural area here. So market did find some sort of resistance and support before continuing to the upside. Now looking at just this area here, we've seen prices already showing a reaction from this area. So all we need to do over the course of next week is identify how does price make its way back into the structure. If price does correct back into the structure, then we will begin to look for our buying opportunities from these price regions here. Now if we obviously do not find any buying opportunities from those areas there, and prices continue to move to the downside, then we will be focused on taking that third touch of structure, obviously waiting for prices to come into our area of structure, then show us that reversal for the continuation to the upside. Nonetheless, guys, we do have this support trend line, this resistance trend line here to be able for us to actually manage our trade and to manage this bias, and we will be looking for prices to violate this descending trend line to the upside, whether that violation happens off this double bottom structure here, or that violation happens after we see prices maybe even give us some nicer bigger structure to the downside. We have no idea, but once prices get into our areas of value, these are the areas where we will begin to start looking for our buying opportunities from. Now this is our directional bias. This is what we're looking to do on AUDCAD, guys. Over the course of next week, we'll go on to AUDJPY. Now on AUDJPY, we'll start off from a daily, and what we're going to do on the daily is just highlight previous price action. We'll take into account these lower structures over there, and now we'll pay attention to what price has done to those lower structures. We've seen price violating those lower structures nice and impulsively to the downside, closing below those lower structures, and then Friday's candlestick sending prices back above closing prices back within our structure. So we are clearly seeing some corrective price action on AUDJPY from a higher time frame perspective. Now what we're going to do on AUDJPY is we're going to approach AUDJPY and look for trades in both directions, guys. Now looking at the structure, we do have this descending structure, and obviously we know descending structures do have the potential to break to the upside. We also see this sell side momentum over here that has been able to violate lower structures, more sell side momentum over here that has been able to violate some support structures. So we do see that there is obviously momentum to the downside, but prices are making its way to the downside in a corrective manner. So what we will be doing on AUDJPY, guys, is we will be obviously looking at previous support structures that have been violated to the downside for a possible retest for some downside continuation of price. So one of the setups that we will be looking for is for price to either terminate within this area here. If we don't see prices terminating within this area, we will look to see prices terminate at our important resistance area. That is an area where we will be looking for some downside continuation, looking to trade in the direction of this momentum. Now on the other hand, guys, because AUDJPY is corrective, guys, in nature, our next potential setup that we're going to have a look at is a potential buy. So we're seeing prices impulsing back to the upside. What we want to see is prices tap into the zone and then begin to give us some deceleration towards our important level of structure. Once prices come into this area of value, after decelerating, we will have logic will align perfectly for us, and obviously we'll have the rules that we've been waiting for that align up perfectly at this higher time frame level of structure. Remember, this is the level of structure that was violated below and prices breaking and closing back above. So we're expecting this level of structure to be respected by price if we see prices coming down coming down in a corrective manner. So we are looking for those potential buy setups from our support structures based off how structure will deliver those buy setups, and we're looking for sell setups from resistance structures based off how price will deliver those setups. Now obviously, if prices do manage to get into this area from this buy, this is when we get to this area, we will obviously re-evaluate our analysis and begin to see if we need to change our bias and look for trades on the opposite end of the market. So this is what we're going to be looking for on AUDJPY over the course of next week. We're going to prioritize those potential buy setups, but obviously also open ourselves to those sell setups forming off resistance. Now that's what we're going to look for over the course of next week for AJ. Let's go on to AU. Now guys, on AU, I think we'll hop up to the daily just for a second, just so that we can see what structure we're looking at on our higher time frames. Now higher time frame structure, guys, we do have this important resistance area that was violated nice and impulsively, and prices could come back and respect this area as support for some continuation to the upside. Now with that being in mind, because our higher time frames, and this is a monthly chart that we are looking, these are monthly swing lows that we are looking at, because monthly is still in a bullish run, we can still expect some bullish price action from AU. Now we'll drop down onto the H4, begin to isolate some structure and identify how are we making this move to our important key support structure over there. We can see prices are consistently making lows, highs, lower highs, and lower lows, signifying to us that we are in a downtrend, but we've then slapped on a resistance and support trend line, taking into account our extreme structural areas to identify what kind of descending structure we have. We do know that descending structures have a potential to break to the upside. Now on AUDUSD, what we will be waiting for is for price to come to our extreme areas. So we want to see prices in the support area, in or close to the support trend line. That is where our buying probabilities will come in on AU. We also have a nice first touch, beautiful second touch, and we could expect AU to terminate in this area with a nice lovely third touch. Now all we need to wait for is for the setup to present itself in the direction we're looking to trade, and then we go for it, guys. So that's all we're looking for on AU. We're bullish bias on AU. We just need to wait for a setup to form that supports the bias, the directional bias that we have on this pair. So looking for those bullish bias setups, looking for price to terminate in our key area, and then obviously looking for that reversal structure that confirms our bullish bias from these areas there. So that's our analysis for AU. That's the direction we are looking to trade. This is the setup that we're going to look to try and capitalize on over the course of next week. Let's move on to CHFJPY. Now guys, on CHFJPY, I think we'll stick to the 4-hour chart because the 4-hour is descriptive enough for us to be able to do this analysis. Now, higher time frame structure, obviously we had this market ascending to the upside. We then saw a nice drop to the downside, being able to violate multiple support structures along the way, creating a new lower low. So we clearly see a lot of sell side momentum coming in on CHFJPY. Now, after every impulsive phase comes a corrective structure. That's why we are beginning, or we're gonna try and isolate some corrective structures from this price action here. Now, what we were looking for on CHFJPY over the course of last week was for prices to violate our structural highs before we see those nice impulsive moves that violate structure to the downside. What we mean, we wanted to see prices come up, violate our important resistance areas, and then make this move to the downside. We see prices terminating at resistance but not coming into our area of support, then violating our structure. Important to note is that prices have violated our structure to the downside and broken and closed back above our structure, showing us some signs of potential bullishness. So on CHFJPY, guys, we're going to open ourselves up to trading both directions. Now, from these areas here, we're going to first of all look for price to come into important support structures, then show us obviously a setup that gives us a trade in the direction that we are looking to trade. And then obviously once prices, or if prices do make their move to the upside, we will be looking to see prices first of all violate this resistance trend line. Once prices have violated that resistance trend line, we will see if prices do tap into our resistance areas for those selling opportunities. So guys, short term we can expect some bullishness. Let's not hastily jump onto this bullish trend, but let's wait for our sell setup to form, guys. This is the setup that we are seeing those beautiful probabilities and risk to reward ratios from, and it will give us an opportunity to trade in the direction of this sell side momentum. So once we're able to isolate structure that supports this directional bias that we have on CHFJPY, we'll begin to look for our third touches, look for our reversal structures, our ascending structures, and then be able to sell into any long-term sell side momentum that might present itself on Swiss yen. So guys, this is the setup, this is the directional bias that we're going into with into Swiss yen with for next week. We're going to be short-term looking for any potential buys that might present themselves up to actually set us up for our long-term sell side momentum. So that's what we're looking for on Swiss yen, guys. Primarily, let's focus on those sell biased setups, waiting for price to actually deliver and give us complete the setup the way that we're anticipating, or the way that we're expecting Swiss yen to deliver that setup. Now guys, let's go on to NZDCAD. We'll hop up to the daily. Now, on the daily, guys, what we will notice is prices at important higher time frame support structures. Support structures where we saw prices react from once, react from twice, and then violate important higher time frame resistance areas. Now, what we're trying to point out by mentioning all of that is that this area is a buy sensitive area where buyers have shown a reaction previously after prices came from these areas, or after prices came into these areas. Now that we have that information, understanding that we have a buy sensitive area on our higher time frames, let's look at the most recent price action. Now that we have the most recent price action here, we're going to identify structure. So we see prices coming in from the top, establishing support, establishing resistance. We then have a lower low, we then have a lower high form, we have a lower low, and I guess right now prices are within these extreme highs and these extreme lows. So clearly prices are within a downtrend because we are consistently seeing those lower highs and lower lows. So prices are within a downtrend, but what matters is how prices approach our area of value. So how prices are approaching our support structure, and by looking at how prices have been violating our structure to the downside, breaking back above, more levels of structure being violated to the downside, broken and closed back above, shows us corrective price action towards our important key higher time frame support. Now, if we were to slap on some trend lines just to get an idea of this downtrend, what we would see is that our structure has been violated nice and impulsively to the upside. Now, going down onto our smaller time frames, what we will do for reference is put on this resistance trend line, just taking into account our extreme highs, and we will notice something. What we will notice is price violating nice and impulsively our resistance trend line to the downside. Now, if we drop down onto that H4, now we will begin to isolate and look for structure that supports this bias that we've established from, or rather off, our higher time frame momentum. So we've discussed that higher time frame, we're seeing this market decelerate towards higher time frame support, and we are seeing prices beginning to reverse trend on our smaller time frames. What do we mean? If we look at the H4, we see prices originating from these support structures, creating a high, establishing a higher low, and then giving us a higher high. Obviously characteristics of an uptrending market on our H4. What we will be looking for is to trade at important key areas. So we have our H4 support trend line over there. If prices do come down into the support trend line, we can and should be looking for bullish bias setups off the support. We will also have our horizontal support structures that price will approach if we do pull lower for those buy setups. We will also have, and on our smaller time frames on our H1, we've identified this descending structure. We do have our first touch of the structure, second touch of the structure, and if prices do come and give us this third touch of our structure followed by a beautiful reversal structure, we will obviously have the probabilities on our side for a beautiful potential buying opportunity with all of the reasons that we've established for ourselves based off our higher time frame structure. At this point, guys, all we need to wait for is for structure to give us a setup in the direction that we're looking to trade. This confirmation, our final structure, our final reversal structure, guys, will be the last piece of confluence that we need that validates all of our reasoning, all of our expectations one last time. So let's just wait for this reversal structure to form. Guys, we are going to be looking to ride New Zealand dollar CAD all the way to these resistance structures over here, and obviously once prices do get into these resistance areas, then we look to see if we need to re-evaluate our analysis. But as things stand, guys, we're at higher time frame support. We've been decelerating towards higher time frame support, and we have begun to see on our smaller time frames prices trending to the upside. With all of these reasons, guys, we're going to go into next week on New Zealand dollar CAD with a bullish bias, just waiting for those bullish bias setups to confirm and give us our entries. Now let's go on to the last pair that we're going to have a look at, and that is New Zealand dollar JPY. Now, guys, on New Zealand dollar JPY, I think let's just stick to the H4 on this pair because it's very similar to AUDJPY, and we have discussed AUDJPY in depth. Now, on New Zealand dollar JPY, guys, what we've done, very similar to AUDJPY, is we've begun to isolate this downtrend that we see forming here. Now, we've obviously have this downtrend forming because we do see prices consistently creating highs, lows, lower highs, and lower lows. But now that we've have that structure. We've isolated and basically slapped on some resistance and some support trend lines to get an idea of what kind of a downtrend do we have on New Zealand dollar yen. Now what we've also done is we've looked at the previous structures that we've isolated, because we were looking for the sell side momentum. So obviously we've seen sell side momentum violating important areas of support nice and impulsively. So guys, we could be looking to trade this sell side momentum. What we need to be waiting for at this point in time on New Zealand dollar yen is for New Zealand dollar yen, guys, to start setting up. Because we're seeing some sell side momentum, we want to be selling from important resistance areas. So what we need to wait to do on NZDJPY is we need to wait to see New Zealand dollar JPY setting up beautifully with that sell bias structure for us to trade some sell side momentum. So we need to be able to isolate structure that will support this sell bias. So if we do see prices ascending toward our important resistance areas, we're looking for that sell. If we see prices impulsing towards our important support resistance areas, and then we see those reversal structures, we're looking to sell. So we are reacting based off what the market then does to show us that prices will complete and continue in the direction where we've seen most recent momentum coming out of. So at this point on New Zealand dollar yen, guys, we're going to hold more of a bearish bias than a bullish bias, just waiting for structures to come into important resistance areas. Even if those resistance areas are much higher, like these resistance areas here, we still will be at resistance and we still will have probabilities to sell from resistance. So because of us wanting to trade all the sell side momentum, we're going to wait for our sell bias setups to form at resistance key areas for some potential sell setups on New Zealand